Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. People like to ask me, Drake, what is your favorite kind of problem player? You've been doing this for close to 2 years now, you gotta have a favorite. To which I usually respond that it's kinda like asking someone to pick their favorite type of stomach parasite. It's the tapeworm, by the way, in case you were curious. But as for the type of problem player that irritates me the most, well, that award has gotta go to the Mary Sue. For those who are unaware, the Mary Sue, or Marty Stew if you want to get inclusive with it, is what happens when the kid from the playground, who was always like, "Nuh-uh, I have a force field that blocks everything," grows up and starts making characters. The term itself originates from the habit that fanfiction writers have to create self-insert characters that completely lack any flaws or depth, and only exist as wish fulfillment for the author. Ray, Scott Pilgrim, Captain Marvel, Jim from The Office, the new Galadriel. It's safe to say that fanfiction writers have grown up and infected pop culture with their drivel. And when drivel starts showing up in media, you know it's gonna find its way into role-playing games. Look, everyone wants to make a cool character. But when you go into a game looking to write a cool character with the expectation that all of the NPCs and other players only exist to highlight just how cool your character is, well, that's a recipe for how to make a character more loathed than even the worst villain ever could be. And you should be expecting a job offer coming in the mail from Disney in the near future. The story I have for you today stars a player who just wanted to play D&D with their group, but committed the unforgivable sin of not bowing before the all-too-perfect might of the Mary Sue, and the meltdown that came afterwards. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from Reddit user GreenGreenGreen12 and is titled Mary Sue Rages and Kicks Me from 2 Campaigns. I thought I should begin this with a definition about what a Mary Sue is, which according to Wiki states, a Mary Sue is a generic name for any fictional character who is so competent or perfect that it appears absurd, even in the context of the fictional setting. Mary Sues are often an author's idealized or flawless self-insertion. Now, the Mary Sue in this story started as the DM to a Roll20 campaign that I joined back in February, a month before Australia was forced to shut down because of the pandemic. I'd been playing D&D 5e for roughly a year and was in a face-to-face group, but we were only playing fortnightly, and I wanted more regular games to fulfill my D&D cravings. Roll20 seemed like a good place to look, and that is where I found a campaign called Rise of the Shadows. It was a homebrew where the story was that this vast world where territories were aligned to elements, think Avatar with the land of fire, land of water, etc., were all being tormented by creatures called shadows, which were consuming people and turning them into shadows. The party were 6 individuals tasked with figuring out how to stop the shadows, but they were also God-chosen, each favored by a god that represented a key element and who had invested a part of their being into their chosen, so that they could have the means of potentially stopping the shadows. It sounded like a fun story, but what really sold it for me was that it was being run by an Australian DM. It has been challenging to find games that didn't clash with my time zone. I filled out an application and hoped for the best, so I was excited when I received a private message from the campaign's DM, saying that they were considering my application, but that everyone that they accepted into their game had to be interviewed by them over a call on Discord. Being new to Roll20 and online D&D, this did give me pause. I also have diagnosed anxiety from previous trauma experienced in my childhood and early adult life. And private conversations with strangers, particularly when I cannot see them so I cannot read their body language, can be a trigger. But I really wanted to be a part of this game, and the excitement over being considered had me taking slow, deep breaths and committing to the interview. And it went well, despite my anxiousness. The DM, let's call her Boo Meadow, was nice and explained her campaign to me, what characters were already in the party, etc., etc. I had pitched the idea of a high elf shadow sorceress, who had been raised by devout worshippers of the campaign's goddess that represented darkness. She'd been sacrificed to the goddess to gain her favor, only to return to them with her shadow magic, causing them to believe her to be favored by the goddess and something of a vessel for her will. They thought that the shadows were of their goddess's doing, and had sent my character out into the world to determine what their goddess's will was. Boo Meadow said that she loved the idea, and that my character could fit in both Rise of the Shadows and another campaign that she was running in the same world but with a different party. However, that campaign was on a different night to Rise of the Shadows and didn't work well with my free time, so I stuck with the campaign that I had applied for. And I was dropped into the game as the party was dealing with a cult that also followed the Dark Goddess and sacrificed children. Though, apparently, this was all for immortality rather than a god's favor. I actually had a fun time for about 3 months. Those who were involved in the campaign liked to chat and be friendly outside of the game, and they brought me into their circle. One of them, who was Boo Meadow's boyfriend, we'll call him Evil One, even invited me into his own campaign, which Boo Meadow played in and encouraged me to join. It was simply called The Order. But the premise of the game was that it was based around the Order of the Gauntlet running a military school in Waterdeep, where players could be playing teenagers living out a high school life. Think D&D Hogwarts. And houses were determined by a god that your character dedicated themselves to, but were really what class out of a short list of allowed choices that you wanted to be. I was sold on being a blood hunter after I was told that they were homebrewed, based on the Witchers from the Witcher series, and Grey Wardens from the Dragon Age series. I'm a fan of both. And that they were unique in that they didn't follow any gods, but had instead been drafted into the Order for reasons that I could explore in character. So I made a tiefling who had joined the Blood Hunters after her mother, who had been her only family, had been turned into a vampire and was out somewhere in the world hurting people. She did not want to kill monsters per se, just the monster that her mother had become. I meant to play her as being a cynical loner because I thought that suited the outcast Witcher vibe that I had been told were blood hunters in this setting. This, however, would be what would unmask Boo Meadow as the overly controlling and downright toxic mean person that she is, and how toxic her circle also is. For you see, I had not known then that every few months the Rise of Shadows would lose a player, and then advertise for a replacement, or that it was basically the same for the Order. And I did not know that Evil One had put together his campaign where everything, and I mean everything, revolved around Boo Meadow's character. Corellin Jesus, her character was dubbed because she was. She was a half-elf, leggy blonde, whose elven side of her family were the second most influential noble house in Evermeet, and her grandmother was the elven ambassador within Waterdeep. Her mother was head of the Order's supernatural department, whilst her human father was basically the Mountain out of Game of Thrones, but nice, after being experimented on to make him superhuman. So, also X-Men. Basically, if the Mountain was also a part of the X-Men and also with a heart of gold. And ever since she had been a child, the elven god Corellin had been visiting and speaking to her, but nobody else could hear or see him, and he made her his chosen. So she was a celestial warlock, and the only warlock allowed in the Order, for the other magical classes were restricted to bard, cleric, or blade singer. She, of course, was top of her classes and popular, and her stats were by far the best in the party. A 20 in charisma, a 17 in intelligence and constitution, a 15 in wisdom, all despite only being a level 1 character. She was also constantly denouncing the head of the Order as the campaign's big bad, despite there being no in-game evidence to prove it. But there were never any consequences from her doing this because diplomatic immunity and her being popular? This is our story's Mary Sue. And due to her character being a Mary Sue, Boo Meadow did not like how I stuck to my blood hunter being a cynical loner. She complained that after my first game in Evil One's campaign, my character had not accepted her smile rock. It was a rock that her character drew smiles on and handed out to new people to state that they were friends now, and sulked when my reply was that the rock wasn't necessarily useful. and so my character would rather not keep it, and continued to sulk when they still weren't BFFs by the end of the second game. However, my character at the time was not the only one resisting her Mary Sue's charms. Another player, who was also in Boo Meadow's own campaign and had been playing longer than me, was a lot more vocal in having his character disagree with hers. Mary Sue had recently been promoted to leader over the party when the Order had us leave the school for missions. And when Mary Sue would bark, "Do this!" the other player's reaction would be, "Why?" Mary Sue would return with, "Because I'm the leader, and so that gives me authority over you." To which the other player would more or less respond with, "Not with that attitude." And Boo Meadow would become visibly frustrated both in character and on a personal level that events were not going her way. She began to complain about the player to those of us in Evil One's game, and those of us who were only part of her campaign insisting that he was being mean to her through her character. And as this player did not join in out-of-game Discord conversations, he couldn't say she was wrong. And after a month since I had joined, the player was kicked from both campaigns. This didn't sit well with me. And when I asked Evil One what had happened, I was told that the player wasn't coping well with being in lockdown from the pandemic, and it was badly impacting on his autism, which the player had never confided in me about being autistic, and he'd stopped communicating with them, so he and Boo Meadow had had no choice but to drop him from their games. In hindsight, I should have listened to that uncomfortable feeling in my gut, but I did not. Just as I had still not made my Blood Hunter be another one of Mary Sue's idolizing friends, and Boo Meadow's frustration was now aimed solely at me. She began to argue with me about decisions that I had made in-game the moment that the session was over, for sometimes over an hour. And if I had done something in-game that caused any sort of drama, she would then go on to tell and constantly remind those in her own game about it. To the point, if there was ever a moment where something didn't go according to plan, both in her own game or in a player's daily life, she referred to it as being a insert my character's name here. I then caught her, after telling the Discord group chat that I needed to leave to do something but only muting myself, telling the group how awful of a character my Blood Hunter was, that I was ruining the game and that if I didn't change, I'd have to leave. Now at this point, my anxiety was being triggered by her behavior. Not to the point where it was unmanageable, but I was beginning to dread the nights where I was to play my Blood Hunter. And I was beginning to hate being her because of how stressed I was feeling, and I never want to be the reason that a party falls apart. So I privately messaged Boo Meadow, telling her that I had overheard what she had said, and that if she really did hate my Blood Hunter, then I was willing to play someone else. She was quick to try and tell me that I had misunderstood her, and that she didn't really hate my character at all, but I didn't buy it, so I messaged Evil One instead, suggesting that it would probably be best if I made a new character. He told me no. He told me that he liked how I was playing my Blood Hunter, and he was sure that Boo Meadow hadn't meant it, and that it was just overly stressed from one of her other campaigns. That he was going to give her a warning, and that I should try to not worry about it. Unfortunately, Boo Meadow didn't appreciate the warning, and likely realizing that if she couldn't get me kicked from her own boyfriend's game, she had the power to make me suffer in hers. The first thing that she did was tell me that my character was no longer from a church that practiced child sacrifice, but from a normal, ethical practicing church, and that there was nothing remarkable about my character. She had just convinced herself otherwise, and that the church hadn't been able to convince her that she was delusional. The second thing that she did was have my character meet the dark goddess that she was now deemed obsessed with. Something that I had been first excited about, as my character was the only member of the party who had yet to meet any of the gods, and I thought it would make for an entertaining conversation and scene. There was no conversation though. My character was separated from the party, where this goddess essentially attacked her, and I wasn't allowed to roll any dice and try and protect myself. Essentially, I was told that this god reached into your chest and took away all your power. I was no longer playing a level 9 shadow sorceress. I had no class or any level for 3 whole sessions. Then I was told that I could choose a new class, but only from a class that another member of the party was already playing. I chose Monk, believing that I could redo my stats and have the opportunity to do the same with some fun plot with Evil One's character, who was the party's monk. Only, no, I was not allowed to redo my stats. I also was not allowed to become a level 9 character again. I had to learn how to be a monk with sorcerer stats starting from level 1, in a campaign where everyone else was now level 10. And then I was told in the next session that our party had upset the characters in her other campaign that was being run in this game's world and time frame, and that their level 10 Chaotic Align Druid, Cleric, and Fighter were specifically coming for my character. That anxiety that had been triggered by Boo Meadow and her Mary Sue was now not manageable at all, as all of the above was happening while Boo Meadow had started to shun me in the Discord group chat, and through her Mary Sue in the Order campaign. I was spending days being unable to leave my house because my thoughts were fixated on what was happening, and how there was little my character could do about it, and was probably gonna die. How I must really be bad at playing D&D, and how this was being done by somebody who I thought was my friend, while others, who I also thought were my friends, just looked on. I was having trouble sleeping and was medicating myself just to get some sleep. I knew that none of this was good, so I approached Boo Meadow and asked if I could miss just one session because I was feeling so anxious. She wanted to know why I was feeling anxious, so I told her. I thought that as my friend, she would understand and give me the break I was asking for. Instead, she told me that clearly her game was not for me, and that I should look for a new campaign. Oof, yikes. Okay, so the Mary Sue is unbearable and incredibly toxic. That goes without saying. But what I'd like to comment on here first is that it might be surprising coming from me, but anxiety is no joke. I used to be one of the people who'd be like, toughen up, loser, Lamau, because of course I was. And yes, while I still do believe that the gene pool has got way too much soy floating around in it, I have to say that I'm a lot more sympathetic to the anxiety thing these days. Because it went and did the one thing that makes me care about anything. It went and affected me! So a while back I was suffering from some heart pain. Like, pretty bad heart pain. Like I'd spend some time before going to bed and the time during my workouts going, oh god, this is the big one, I'm dying today. Which caused me to worry about it and hyper-focus on it. Until eventually I stopped being a dumbass and went to the doctor. They laid me down, strapped some wires to my hot bod, sat me up and said, dude, you have anxiety, quit being a bitch and get a therapist or something. And then I never had heart pains ever again. I had literally created a cycle of anxiety, where I would have heart pains, worry about it, and then give myself heart pains. I paid the American healthcare system way too much fucking money for this doctor lady to tell me that I'm scared of other people, which is something I already knew. So if that little bit was enough to make me feel like I was gonna die, I can only imagine what other people gotta go through. So yeah, I got a little bit of sympathy for OP here, but I got zero sympathy for Boo Meadow. Ugh, playing with a character-obsessed player or DM is just the worst. When it's a player, they tend to get all huffy because their precious baby isn't the object of all the players' and NPCs' infatuations, which is annoying. And when it's the DM who's piloting the Mary Sue, it's even worse because the rest of the world suffers because too much time and attention is put onto this one character that, odds are, the players don't even like. This is exactly why I think the Mary Sue is the worst kind of problem player. Edgelords are annoying, and murder hobos can potentially ruin games if left unchecked. But a well-placed Mary Sue acts as a sort of narrative axle that all the garbage writing revolves around. Most stories can survive a cringe edgelord protagonist, maybe even a murder hobo, but no fictional universe can survive a Mary Sue in the forefront. I then got privately messaged by Evil One, who proceeded to chew me out for stressing out Boo Meadow. She had told him everything that I had said to her. He said that the problem was with me, and that I was being problematic with my characters by being inflexible. not showing enough emotion with my characters, and I was making people uncomfortable. And that I clearly had a problem with Boo Meadow's game because I did not ask for a break from his game, and that maybe D&D in general wasn't for me. This had me really upset, and while I could have just walked away and should have, I didn't want to. I still love the stories that they both had created, and I wanted to believe that they were still my friends. So I begged Evil One to allow me to stay in his campaign. I again said I was anxious and struggling with my anxiety, and that it was probably my anxiety that was making me exaggerate things, and that I was so sorry for stressing out Boo Meadow. He pressed me to explain more to him about my anxiety, and I unhappily confided in him about my earlier mentioned trauma. His response was to tell me, "We're all broken," but that I still needed to step away from the game. If I agreed not to play D&D for 2 weeks and made a new character for his campaign, he would talk with his girlfriend and see if I could return to their campaigns then. Boo Meadow messaged me later that night saying that Evil One had told her what he'd told me and that she would give me 2 weeks as well. So I did as I said I would. And the only thing D&D related that I did was to continue to talk in the Discord chat, though Boo Meadow and a few others continued to act coldly towards me. And then after the first week was done, Evil One messaged me privately. At first, he just asked me how I was doing, but eventually he told me that I was out of Boo Meadow's game despite her telling me that I could come back after the second week. It was a decision that she could not tell me herself. She was too stressed out by it, as others within her game had told her that they did not like my character, or how I was playing the game and just wanted me gone. But Evil One reassured me that he did not feel that way, so I could come back to his game in a week. He told me to use my new character to prove to them that I'm not a bad player. It hurt. It was like confirmation that I had not been over-exaggerating Boo Meadow's behavior. But it also meant that some of those who I had been talking to almost daily for months and thought were my friends weren't. But Evil One was still my friend, I told myself, and him letting me stay in his game was enough. Also, he told me that he had created a second campaign in the same world as the Order, but that focused on a school in Neverwinter that he was moving the Mary Sue into temporarily to make everyone feel comfortable. So I made a new character, a half-elf cleric of the Light Domain, and I tried hard to make him as different from my blood hunter as possible. I gave him a wholesome family, where he was just an untested student of the Order, eager and hoping to prove himself, and prepared to play without Mary Sue, though Boo Meadow still turned up to the session to listen in. I thought the first game went pretty well, but I was still anxious, now pretty much convinced that I'm not as competent a D&D player as I thought that I was. So I asked Evil One how he thought it went, and if there's anything I need to change in regards to my new character. Unfortunately, his response roughly summed up to, "It was different, but it's still early, so don't worry about it right now." And in hindsight, after a second game, I know that his reply was essentially BS, as the day after that game, he told me that he was kicking me. I asked him if I had done anything wrong, and he told me that that wasn't it. Apparently, my character was just not liked, but he admitted it was because no one was willing to give him a chance after my blood hunter, and that Boo Meadow had told him that she felt awkward about how things were between her and me, and that I must feel that way too based on how I was playing the night before. 2 players had said that they don't want to play so long as I was part of the game, and so he was going to drop the Order entirely after I was gone and just focus on the Neverwinter campaign that he had made for his girlfriend. He and Boo Meadow would then block me from viewing their campaigns on Roll20, and had me leave the group Discord as well. This happened a few days ago, and recounting exactly how I ended up here and the toxicity leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I don't want to give up D&D over this, but this experience has definitely left me feeling pretty insecure. End of story. You know, as weird as it sounds, this is actually kind of a happy ending. With OP's anxiety, I doubt they would have ever been able to climb that mountain of awkwardness having to leave the group themselves. And plus now they're minus a whole group of toxic people. I understand wanting to stay in a group when they're the only D&D group you have, but you really owe it to yourself to experience a hobby that you enjoy with people that you enjoy being around. The way I'm choosing to see it is like if you go to the doctor and get a terminal diagnosis only for the tumor to go, nah, I'm good, and then just f off by itself. That's a win for everyone, dude. Life is too short for bad stories made by bad people. And one guaranteed way to make a bad story is to add a little pinch of Mary Sue. Rest in peace, Star Wars. Now on that note, let's go ahead and take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Joseph Mays and depicts an adventurer's journey to seek the Drake's guidance so that he might look upon his mortal form with his special eyes.
Your contact lenses just arrived.
1-800-CONTACTS.
They can't have my brand. I have special eyes.
Look with your special eyes.
My brand!
Thank you again, Joseph Mays, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.